Hey everyone, today we are looking at the meta after Sephiroth. This was one of the suggestions I got from my Discord server, where I asked you guys what you'd like to see covered in the next couple of days when the current week is super boring and dull. So here we are. One of the suggestions was to check out units that are actually hyped up after Sephiroth and what happens to the meta in general. Spoiler alert, the meta is getting very, very stale and boring after Sephiroth hits. And I'll explain why within the next few slides. So let's get this started with a disclaimer, because I feel like people are going to willingly misunderstand this video for what it's not. So this is all my personal opinion. I haven't done the full math on any of the units that we're going to talk about, because there is still a very, very, very minuscule chance that global may change damage values, LBs, etc. And if I did calculations now, they might be rendered completely useless when these units actually arrive on the global server. Another thing is, if you're a huge fan of Dragon Quest, for example, that Dragon Quest collaboration we are supposedly getting in 2 months or so is going to be the best thing ever. But for me, I'm like, yeah, Dragon Quest is cool and all, but I don't really care about the series much. So yeah, your mileage may heavily vary based upon your favorite units. We are also assuming that Gumi is basically not really buffing anything. I know this somewhat contradicts the second bullet point on this list, but yeah. Still, I want to keep all things considered here, and yeah, things may change, but I'm not assuming they will. Another thing is, I don't include global exclusive units because we know that there's 3 more coming from the FanFest. We also know that Gumi is going to release a unit in spring. That was one of the units we could vote on lately. But with Clash of Wills, Gumi somehow forced themselves to release at least one global exclusive unit every 3 months for each season of Clash of Wills. Otherwise, the Clash of Wills meta is going to be stale with the units we've gotten so far up to that point. And yeah, I think Clash of Wills, while the feature is okay in itself, it actually makes Gumi, or forces Gumi's hand by constantly releasing new units, or they will have to stop Clash of Wills at some point. So that's kind of an idea that is going to backfire for Gumi heavily, I feel like, but that's not the topic of this video. And I'm also looking at units that might be worth pulling for. And if you're not seeing any unit that you think is super cool, it's because I think it's a full skip. And I'm just gonna put this out right now. I think units that are missing brave shifts, that so to speak super limit burst units, are badly designed, and I don't like the concept of super limit burst, SLB, shortened or abbreviated, just because it actually restricts your gearing options. You don't have a brave shift anymore. You cannot, for example, gear for pure resistances, bulk, for example, in base form, and then have full DPS in brave shift, such as with Noctis, Near Vision Noctis, or Near Vision Sephiroth, who can also do that. Or Near Vision Sephiroth, for example, you can build him for entirely LB fill in base form, and then the brave shift being full DPS. You can't do this as effectively with SLB units. I know the latest ones, they have such high stats and high passives that it's somewhat doable to gear for resistances, killers, and LB damage all together, but it still leaves a very, I don't know, sour taste in my mouth when I just think about losing options. Anyway, so that is there are the disclaimers, so please keep that in mind for the upcoming units that we're going to talk about. And let's get this started for real this time. So the first one, it's Celes. You guys know probably by now that I'm a huge fan of Celes or Final Fantasy VI in general. In my opinion, Final Fantasy VI is still the second best Final Fantasy ever released after Final Fantasy VII, or Final Fantasy VII Remake for that matter. And such that I will definitely pull for Celes. Now, I don't plan on going all the way for Celes. I am absolutely fine with just going to EX plus 1 with her, but because I still believe she's just a good tank. She has her 45% ice amplification on her Brave Shift that does not require any EX level shenanigans, so that's fine. She's, as a magic tank, she's also super good, has built-in FSI, preemptive cover just like Phasey, reapplies cover on auto attacks, buffs 200% SPR to self, has very strong mitigation buffs, does Avian and Dragon Killer to the party, 250 LB damage for the party, LB fill for the party. She does a lot of things on a super condensed kit, and that is why I am personally gonna pull for her. And yeah, that's gonna be one of my last pulls in a very long time. And yeah, so when is she coming out? She's the next mocking after the Final Fantasy VII mocking, meaning she's definitely coming in August, which I like. But my Lapis stash doesn't, because we're gonna get Sephiroth, we're gonna get Tifa and Aerith at some point in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So that's gonna put a huge blow in my Lapis stash, and releasing Celes right after, ooh, that's gonna feel bad. I might end up reaching that number 0 very soon again. But then again, we're gonna have very bad months coming up, so there's nothing to pull on, and my Lapis stash is going to recover rather quickly. She also releases with Samurai Cyan, or however you pronounce his name, who is a super Lumen Burst unit. I just briefly calced his damage. He's double Zidane technically, but I did only calc Zidane with the gear we currently have, and Cyan with the stuff he will have access to, such as double Tifa accessory, Sephiroth, STMR, etc. So those was a little bit heavily weighted towards Cyan and less so to Zidane. So things might change, and that's why I put the disclaimer earlier that it was just a very brief calculation, nothing too serious. But yeah, he does have a lot of damage, but it's nothing comparable to Sephiroth. So yeah, he's just bad. In my opinion, that is. So the next unit is Pearl from Legends of Mana. And if you're already thinking, yeah, it's Mana, I agree. That's why the last bullet point on the slide also says we might never actually see this collaboration. Because for whatever reason, Gumi hates Mana collabs and the Mana series in general. So yeah, this is just wishful thinking of mine. We're also probably never gonna see Hawkeye, which I feel like is the most stupid thing ever, but whatever. I have given up hope on that, so yeah. I mean, I just put in Pearl on this list because she's worth mentioning. She works pretty well with Sephiroth. She is a physical dark LB chainer in her Brave Shift, and thus being pretty cool for Sephiroth because he is a dark finisher in Brave Shift. And Pearl also, which I find kind of funny, makes hammers relevant because she has a super strong hammer STMR, and her kit also has a 25% hammer in parallel. It's cool, and she does actually reach good numbers from what I've seen, so if we're getting her, she's not that bad, and if we were to get her, maybe I'd pull for her. I don't know, but I like the Mana series, so I would pull for Hawkeye regardless, even if he came in 2 months or 3 months. And I would also pull for Pearl, or Ilazul, who is the other unit on that Legends of Mana banner. I would also pull for that, but we all know it's not coming anyway. Finally enough, I just wanted to mention this. Pearl's base form is the most useless thing I've ever seen in my life. She has one ability that is hide for 3 to 5 turns. It's random, which is even more stupid, I think. But the other ability is an MP, HP, and LB gauge fill all in one, and that's it. If the wiki isn't even wrong, her LB does literally nothing. How funny is that? I mean, on the one hand, I think it's the laziest design they have ever done. On the other hand, her Brave Shift actually makes up for that somehow. So yeah, it's all good. But yeah, we're not gonna see Pearl anyway. It's because it's mana. And that means we are also reaching pretty much the end of the current JP timeline, because Final Fantasy X is next, and Near Vision Yuna is one of those units you kind of want, but for different reasons. Usually you would pull a unit because she has, or the unit is superb in damage or provides superb utility, such as Ling, for example, or does a lot of things. But with Yuna, things are a little bit different. You're actually pulling for her just because, or mainly for her Super Trust Master, because that one increase, I put this in the brackets or parentheses, because it increases modifiers for all LB, evoke LBs by 30x, which greatly buffs every single evoker, such as Yuna. Yuna obviously too, she's an evoker in Brave Shift, but also Luna Freya and Terra. Now Terra, she's also getting a few upgrades down the line with the crowns, which we may never see in global, but considering those crowns can be bought with real money, or at least technically speaking you can buy them with real money, I feel like we're gonna get crowns, because that's where Gumi makes the money with in the next couple of months. So yeah, Terra and Luna Freya still being relevant in 3 to 4 months is something I am personally looking forward to, and one of the reasons is actually Yuna. Now her STMR is already great, but if you include Yuna in your party, she has that 30x LB evoke modification for all party members that also applies to LBs in her own LB in base form, thus making Luna Freya and Terra even stronger. Now, one has to keep in mind that future Dark Visions will force you to use one specific element. Currently, as you might know, we do have one boss that is, for example, a beast boss, and it's weak to fire and, say, dark, and is only specified or favors magic DPS, such as the very next Dark Visions boss we are facing. If we really follow suit with the Dark Visions changes, stages going forward in September will not force you to a specific type of DPS, such as physical or magical, but it's not going to matter anymore if you're bringing physical or magical, because the values will stay the same. And what's going to happen is you're going to have a boss that is, for example, weak to dark and is imperiled to dark innately by, I don't know, 130 or 120, and the other elements, they are buffed by X amount. I don't know the full value by how much these other elements are buffed in resistances, but these values, they highly disincentivize you from using wrong element chainers, such as Sephiroth. Now Sephiroth is still the exemption of the rule, because his damage is so absurd that it doesn't even matter if you're bringing him on an off element enemy. He's just gonna power through everything, literally. And that makes bringing Luna Freya or Terra still not as viable, but when the time is right and when the element is right, Luna Freya and Terra will greatly profit from Yuna's abilities. And that is why I am probably gonna pull for Yuna, mainly for her STMR, less so for the actual utility that she provides. I mean, she does a lot of damage, but she's heavily gimped by being an SPR based evoker. Also in the case of Luna Freya, she also brings that critical staff imperil that Luna Freya is greatly missing, and it's actually something that will make Luna fall off a cliff literally in terms of meta viability, because Terra gets a lot of buffs with excuse me, with the crowns down the line, with Rain potentially, we don't know, but Near Vision Rain also has 50% fire amp if he gets his upgrades, that is. And that is all going to really boost Terra's damage, and Luna Freya is starting to fall behind rather quickly again. But with the Staff in Peril, Luna Freya is getting, well, relevant again, which I like personally, because I like Luna Freya's kit, and I like Luna Freya as a unit. So yeah, I talked long enough about Yuna. Let's move on to the actually last unit on this list, and it's Auron, without any surprises, I guess. Because I believe many of you already heard that Auron, even though he's a super limit burst unit, is pretty much a Wind Sephiroth. Now, I put the brackets in jokingly, but it's also half serious, because what Alum did with Auron is they just took Sephiroth's kit, removed the Brave Shift, and put in the most lazy parts about Sephiroth onto Auron, changed the element from dark to wind, and called it a day. That's pretty much all there is. I mean, yeah, Auron has breaks, but those breaks are 70% or 80% in case of a limit burst. But that's it. I feel like they did Auron dirty still, because in the actual game, Auron was more of a breaker than an actual super DPS. So I feel like at this point, Alum just does whatever they want, not even remotely staying close to the original version of the units in the games themselves. I feel like it's just bad, but that's just me. Your opinion may vary in that regard, and I respect that. But the good things about Auron is he has great Super Trust, a great Super Trust Master, great TMR, which is 80% attack and 50% Esper stats, which is pretty much Dream of the Faith or GF extension, but on steroids, which is pretty sweet. And his Vision card is another 125 attack Vision card with pretty much like for like stats of Sephiroth, so to speak. So like I said, take everything Sephiroth has, remove the Brave Shift, and put it in with a different element, and you got Auron pretty much. But yeah, one thing that I want to note about Auron is that depending on the type of enemy you're facing, in this case plants and fairies, Auron is going to be superior to Sephiroth, which is something not many people expected, I believe. But yeah, that's what early calculations are saying. Now, like I said, I haven't personally done the math, but going just by very, very brief checks, plants and fairies are where you want to bring Auron over Sephiroth. Or both, technically, but Auron is going to do more damage. What I personally like about Auron, that he is very flexible in gearing, more so than Sephiroth too, because one of the downsides of Sephiroth is that he has to use his STMR, if I'm not entirely mistaken, which is a cloth slot or a chest piece slot, and that locks you out of potentially a lot of good STMR, such as Neo Vision Noctis or Neo Vision Arden's STMR, which have killers on them. So that is something that Auron can use. Now, technically speaking, for raw damage, his best choice is still Sephiroth's STMR or the chest piece. But in terms of killers, Auron has more flexibility. And that is one of the upsides of his. A downside of Auron, on the other hand, is that he really needs external attack buffs. Because for whatever reason, he only can buff 280% attack by himself. I don't know what Gumi was smoking when they designed that kit, but having a DPS unit that far down the line with no 300% buffs, I think that is pretty stupid, so to speak. I mean, yeah, we're gonna use Aerith anyway, she has 400% buffs. But in terms of utility or self-utility, that should not have happened. And again, just like Yuna, Auron is 3 to 4 months away, depending on how many global exclusive units we get. Alright, and regarding all the other units that I haven't mentioned yet, there is a clear trend. And the meta will shift to units having a single element attached to them, and they specialize in that element, and they only matter really for a single Dark Vision stage that Alan thought was a cool idea. So units such as Kurasame, who's Ice Locked, Dragon Lord, that is Dragon Quest, is Fire Locked, Pause, Light locked, Illazul, wind locked, Pearl, dark locked, we already talked about her, and so on and so forth. So that is the next step in the meta. Alam thought that Dark Visions was the means to all ends, and locked units behind a single element. And yeah, another thing is that none other than Auron, who needs very specific circumstances as I just pointed out, can even remotely surpass Sephiroth in terms of damage unless Gumi really buffs then. Utility on the DPS takes a huge nosedive. DPSers are just pretty much, yeah, you press the power up, you press the limit burst and you're done. Most or pretty much all of the units that we are about to get after Sephiroth, they just don't do anything for the party anymore, which makes them rather uninteresting and boring from my point of view. And also that means that all DPS just become blatant copies of each other, only varying in their elements and very minor kit adjustments. And another thing that I have to mention here is that the unit design is becoming even lazier. New Vision and Riku, for example, who was released right after Yuna, she's just a blatant copy of a 5-star. Has the exact same kit, has the same animations, and so on and so forth. They didn't even bother with that, and I feel like it kind of sets a bad precedent that the game might be going a very steep downhill curve from Sephiroth onwards. So yeah, we really have to hope that global exclusive units will be the shining star in the sky, because the units that Alam put out, they are all bad for different reasons and are super uninteresting, and I'm not really hyped about anything other than Celes, well, Pearl, Yuna and Auron, and that makes pulling rather uninteresting. I will probably not pull for 2 months straight even, just because the units are bad, so to speak, and the only hope we got is that global exclusive units are actually good. So yeah, and that concludes this video. I know I was ranting a lot, but I feel like it's something you really have to point out, that the direction the game is going, it's really becoming obvious that less and less budget is allocated to Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. And I feel like it's a pity, because the game in itself is pretty good, the mechanics are great, the sprites are awesome for the most part. And yeah, we'll have to see. I'm really banking on the fact that Gumi themselves can do some great global exclusive units, and they are our only hope. Please save us. And with that, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful Saturday, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're from, and we'll see each other tomorrow for the next video. And that one is going to be things I really want to see changed within Final Fantasy Brave Exvius that would make the game so much more enjoyable. Alright, bye bye.